Maryland sports betting landscape finally opened. We looked at the books. There was a couple spreads that people really liked. They liked the Tampa Bay one. They liked the Seattle one. They liked, which other one was it? The Chargers one and the Ravens one. If you bet those four big winners, you would have failed. The Ravens did not cover, nor did they even win in a really depressing collapse in the fourth quarter. The story retold itself. For the fourth time this year, the Ravens figured out a way to lose when it was kind of interesting. If there was a sigh of relief when Oliver scored a touchdown, and when Peter said that, I was like, man, I'm still stressed. I'm still like holding my face. I'm breathing through my hand. You know what I mean? Like when you have it over your mouth or whatever. You're just like, I don't want to watch. I'm watching, and it looked good with that like fumble sack, and I was like, oh yeah, the defense is doing the thing. The defense is good, and then they just kind of went right down the field again and surprised us a little bit and got the shady touchdown call, and then the 2-point conversion almost felt inevitable. They motioned over Zay Jones against Stevens, and I was like, oh man. And Chris talked about it with Jason, like what if they try to motion to create a matchup they like? And we could have responded. We could have moved Marlowe, but we didn't. We stuck to our guns and exploited one last time after what seemed to be almost a solid game for Stevens there at the beginning. Just a really, really rough outing, and a game that I think a lot of people thought the Ravens had won at one point during the game and felt like business as usual almost.
Yeah, it was, you got to give props to the Jags. We said that this was a possibility of happening in this game. A young team, a lot of young, talented players, just not all coming together as a unit yet. Coming off a bye, how are they going to respond? And they came out and they fought. They fought the whole game, a game the Ravens definitely could have won. And unfortunately, at the end, we saw some problems that we saw previous to the bye week crop back up. We were hoping some of these issues were fixed after last week. But as we did mention, the Panthers, quarterbacked by Baker Mayfield, are one of the worst offenses, if not the worst offense in 2022 NFL landscape. That may have had something to do with it. And unfortunately, yet again, the defense at the end of the game gives up a touchdown. It's been the story all year for this team, even in the games that they've won big, against Tampa Bay and New Orleans, still had those garbage time touchdowns given up. It's something that's got to be fixed, but yeah, at the same time, you have to give credit to the Jaguars. They might be starting to figure something out there. Maybe next year, 2 years from now, there'll be a team in the playoff consideration. But for the time being, even though the Ravens are still ahead in the AFC North, they have the tiebreaker over Cincinnati. They're 7-4 right now. It's frustrating that they really should have won. You look back at the ESPN graphic when the Ravens had the Jags cornered at 3rd and 21 on that final drive. ESPN gave them 100% win chance probability for the Ravens at that point in the game. And then we know what happened there. They got into 4th and not terribly too long, converted that, and then the rest was history. So frustrating game just because we've seen this story multiple times already this year. But hopefully the Ravens will be able to recover. How they respond from this is going to tell the story for the rest of the year. But as we're standing right here, depressing. I think that's what Chris used before we started recording, and I think that's a pretty apt description of where we are as a fan base right now on this Monday.
Yeah, so many things went bad, man. Just offense, defense, just so many different things. It's funny, Peter, when you're talking about the defense just now, one of the things that kind of came into my head is, the off-season pod that we had looking over the different position groups in the draft. Man, at this point, I really would have liked to have a corner in, the second round, like a McCreary or, somebody. Because, at least on the defensive side of the ball, I think with Hamilton being out, I think that was the major matchup nightmare of the Ravens just don't have a third corner right now. And I think we might want to talk about it, but I think it's questionable if they even have a number 2 corner right now. I don't think Peters is playing good football right now. Definitely did not play good football on Sunday. To the point where it's a big liability. The Jags could basically take their pick of, who's lined up against Peters, who's lined up against Stevens, or whoever is playing. Basically, don't throw to Marlowe. They didn't really throw to him that often. The couple times they did, it was like a short out to Kirk. He may have got like 2 or 3 yards, tackled immediately. I think there may have been a pass deflection at some point to Marlowe, but other than that, Zay Jones had a day. Marvin Jones at the end had that touchdown. It seemed like they could do whatever they wanted. But I know we talked about how, Trevor Lawrence, maybe didn't have, the poise to be able to make big plays in big times. Well, this game, he had it. He was able to make the plays that they needed to make, and the receivers were able to get open. And I think, if at least we're going to talk about that side of the ball, I think that was a huge difference maker this game that, Mike McDonald's going to have answers for.
I wrote in the notes, I think that we're dealing with a Ed Reed 2012 issue right now. I think we all remember that season super well, the Super Bowl season. But Ed Reed was not the legendary Ed Reed that year. He had liabilities in coverage. He made mistakes, but he also made flashes of plays, had the swagger, led the team. And I feel like that's kind of where we're at with Peters. Definitely, I really think if we had him manned up every single play, it'd be a better outcome than the zone swapping. And I'm not even necessarily sure that he's playing zones. There's a difficult way to put it. I think he's playing them optimally, but it's suboptimal in aggregate because zone is a team sport. And what I mean by that is he seems to be biting down low sooner, swapping to the back safety, then faster than the safety is ready to take over the responsibility. You could argue that he's making the right play and like he's switching assignments fast enough. But if they're not handing off in sync, that's when you get those gaps, and then it always looks like the play's behind him. And I just think like he doesn't like zone. Like we know Marcus Peters does not like zone. And part of me wonders as a defensive coordinator why Mike McDonald's like, but we're going to keep making you play it. Because, I don't know, there's plenty of concepts where you can run zone everywhere else, but have him man up. Like that's a thing. That's a concept, And I just don't know. I don't know what they're doing with that. That's my major concern is that I feel like at this point he has a very limited set of skills almost, or at least like things that he's better at, and we're still trying to ask him to do everything, but he's a player that's going to be out there for every snap. So do we need to adjust our plan a little bit to better accommodate where he is in his career?
It's an interesting argument. And it's a tough one for me to figure out what angle I would take if I were in Ben McDonald's shoes. Did I do that again? Mike McDonald's shoes. Why did there have to be? Could he have just changed his name to something like McFred? I don't know. Not the same last name as the Orioles ex-Orioles player. Anyways, because part of me feels like and of course I've never played football at the NFL level. I've never played football at the high school level. I've played football at the flag football, backyard football level, which is way different. I've been told. I would think that someone, Marcus Peters, who's been in the league as long as he has, who is as accomplished as he is, should be able to adapt to a different scheme. And of course, yes, every player has their own skill sets and athleticism that tailors them to better thrive in different situations. But some of the issues that you're talking about there kind of feel like someone who's been in the league that long, who has that football IQ, should be able to adapt. And again, I think it's hard for us to know the whole story standing where we are without being in the practices and the film sessions. So I understand what you're saying. It doesn't answer all the questions I have personally, but I think, though, of course, like we're talking about with new defensive coordinator, there's going to be growing pains sometimes, and sometimes vets don't buy into everything. So it could be that as well. I don't want to call out Peters for not really knowing where his head is with the new scheme, and also where he is physically. I think that is also part of what it is as well, as him still trying to get his body back to where it was pre-injury. But yeah, I would hope that if the answer is Peters doesn't like playing zone, he hasn't really done it much at the NFL level, it would give me hope that he could still master that before we get to the playoffs. Just because, a guy who's been in the league that much, and I'm also be surprised if he hasn't played zone coverage at some point in his football career. So, yeah, regardless of what the exact specifics are of it, though, unfortunately, right now, Peter's a guy who we thought would be a strength of this team. He's had some good plays, but yeah, it just seems game in and game out, there's a play or two where he just looks like he was the liability there, where the defense was trying to target him. And that's unfortunate from a guy who's been excellent throughout his NFL career, that he's having a little bit of tough sledding right now. And we'll see if he's able to recover from that.
Overall, I agree with you, Chris, that we just are in a really bad place as far as the cornerback group goes, which didn't feel like the situation going into the season. Now, granted, we've had injuries and we've had, I guess, some fluctuation in play, so to speak. Mostly, though, the injuries, right? We lost Fuller. We lost Jaguars Davis, who, not saying that he was a world beater by any stretch of the imagination, but he's become unavailable and not able to practice as much, and that's not going to help his development either. We saw like the rise and fall of Pepe Williams, where we thought he would be a relevant source and could keep Marlon on the outside, and we could use him in the slot corner. That hasn't really developed, and it's just been a whole multitude of things, and I don't know. I felt like the Ravens had enough corners going into the season. We've said this before, though, and I just think there's not enough roster spots to be perfect in the corner situation unless you just have outside linebacker level depth. Like the Ravens have an outside linebacker at corner going into the season, and we just don't have it at this point. And it's going to be a major investment going into the offseason. Is it an acquisition in free agency? Possibly, but probably not, because they're going to be expensive. Is it draft capital? Well, that's going to be tricky too, because they only have one high profile pick at the moment. They could trade back, they could trade players, but we only have the one first, then it's a third round pick. And, it's going to get kind of slim pickings after that. As far as like a plug and play guy, you can fall into one, don't get me wrong, but it's just tricky. And you can hope and pray that, Armour Davis gets better over the offseason, has an Averett level trajectory and becomes more usable. But I'm worried, because I don't think, unless Marcus Peters signs like a real team-friendly deal, I think this is his last year in Baltimore. And even if he did, it's not going to be a full fix of the situation.
Right. Yeah, for sure. I think, kind of taking it back to the game a little bit, I do think this year is more pronounced than maybe the last couple of years under Wink, that cornerback, it's not the same focal point, I think, of the defense as it used to be. Now, don't get me wrong. We've still got good players in the secondary. That's clear, because the Ravens wanted to spend so much money to be able to sign guys, like Marcus Williams and everything. There's a lot of money in this secondary. But that being said, just from a personnel right now, it's definitely more clear that the strength of this team is on defensive line and now linebackers, honestly. Is it salvageable? Maybe. I think the first key thing is that Hamilton's got to come back, and he's got to come back healthy. I think, that was honestly masking part of this issue, right? We didn't have to rely on guys like Pepe and Armour Davis and Stevens, because Hamilton had really kind of stepped up in that role and could play that really well. So, I have to imagine that has to be part of the solution right now. Is, the Ravens are in a, they're in a win now mode, right? Whether they're all in, debatable, but we're in a win now mode. This is our window. We don't really have the luxury of letting these players develop, because we're looking to win this year and not a year or two from now. They can still develop, but that can happen async, but we need to have players who can actually contribute now. So I do think that's kind of step one. But kind of taking it a little bit away from the secondary for a moment, I kind of wanted to go a little bit more into linebackers, because I do think, it's complementary. And I do think that the Jags did a really good job of getting the ball out relatively quickly, kind of taking advantage of some of those matchups in the secondary. And honestly, we didn't have that much of a pass rush this game. It was a little bit more weak than I think in other games past. It did heat up a little bit toward the end of the game. Calais Campbell had a sack. I think he's at 99, if I recall.
Yep.
A couple other people had sacks, but it did look a little bit lighter. I felt that Lawrence was not under duress for most of the game. He was able to make the throws that he needed to. There were some moments I think he just kind of missed some throws, but I didn't, it didn't seem like to me that he was under too much duress, at least from our pass rush. So, that's another area where, I think there's room for improvement.
That's interesting. I actually thought that the pass rush was honestly the best part of the game yesterday. Now, did they sack Lawrence a ton? I mean, they still got 4 sacks, so it wasn't like it was a slow day at the office for the defense. I also felt there were plenty of times where we had multiple linebackers and corners, safeties in the backfield to disrupt some of these screens that the Jags were doing. In my opinion, although I do understand what you're saying to a degree, it really just came down to that the Jaguars did an excellent job of getting the ball out quickly, doing screens. Their offense looked exactly like what we thought it would going into the game. That's what they like to do. It's a lot of quick passing, a lot of screens. And ultimately, I think the Ravens defense did a fairly good job of combating that, because if we remember in the past few seasons, that was an area of real weakness for this team. The blitz happy scheme that Wink liked to do was always susceptible to giving up big plays in that situation. So it felt good to finally see the Ravens really bottle that up. And honestly, for most of the game, the Ravens really did keep the Jaguars offense in check. One of the touchdowns that they got was on an unfortunate Gus Edwards fumble in the fourth quarter. I will admit, I'm forgetting off the top of my head how they got their first touchdown. I think that was on the after the failed fourth down conversion.
Yep. Yeah. Shorter field.
So the 2 touchdowns that the Ravens gave the Jags before that final drive were on short field. So you have to commend the defense on that. Of course, you want them to stop them there. But before the final drive, when the Jags started with the ball on their own side of the field, they weren't able to score a touchdown. So I think in that regard, they did their job to a good enough extent. But of course, it wasn't enough in the end.
I kind of agree with Peter there, too, because, I mean, if you look at the raw number of 4 sacks, that seems like a decent amount. But then at the second level, it was tough. Like you mentioned, Peter, they had a lot of ball out quick opportunities. And what I noticed is that the interior was actually pretty much collapsing relatively frequently. I thought they were getting good interior push. And, Lawrence just had to get the ball out quick. Now, the couple times that they did get home, they were so huge a splash offense, right? You had Tybo assault him, get the fumble out, and have Marcus Peters pick it up. You had Calais Campbell in that final drive, first play, or no, not the first play, second play, get the sack, fumble, and almost recovered it, and that would have obviously flipped the game for us. And then you also had that back-to-back sequence with Marlon Humphrey, tackle for loss, and then sack, and then the first drive of the game, Broderick Washington with his little splash sack. So
that was the first play of the game for the defense, wasn't it?
I think so. Yeah, it was one of those things where I think they knew. I mean, right away, right? Broderick Washington for first sack. They knew. All right, we need to do ball out quick. We need to change our scheme. And then what's interesting is I think all those last plays came out of desperation. So they were behind. They needed to get a spark to try to move the ball down the field. And that's when we had more of the sacks again. Now, were they able to recover from them? Obviously, yes. In a lot of the scenarios, they were able to erase the sack and kind of proceed. It wasn't a drive ender. So that's I think that's the biggest pain point right now, is it wasn't enough. And looking at it, I thought our inside linebacker play was fine. There wasn't as many splash plays from the unit, but I think that was a personnel thing. There was a couple times that they came out with 4 wide out sets, and they picked on our linebackers. They picked on Queen in coverage because they had wide receivers out. And I was like, oh, they figured it out. We really like having 2 linebackers out there. And if you just bring out 4 wide receivers, we don't want to bring out any of our corners, and that's a huge liability. So the second they run into teams that have 4 wide receivers that they're willing to put out there, I don't think they have to be good. It's basically, we're back to the whole problem, and I see Chris is nodding his head. We're back to the whole problem of what happened against the Steelers. The Steelers were not good that year that they beat us, but they brought out 4 or 5 wide receiver sets and said, we'll find somebody open, I'm sure. And it worked.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point, Alec. One play, I think that first touchdown to Peters we're kind of talking about, of that one was debatable in my opinion, like to give Peters the benefit of the doubt. I think that was debatable because that was a pure matchup issue. I think it was the play, let's see, the ball ended up going to Hasty, I believe. He was out wide, and I think it ended up that Peters was aligned to him, and then Queen was on Kirk. And that's not even a knock toward Queen at that point. It's just a mismatch of you're having their number one wide receiver and a linebacker. But the thing is they didn't even throw Kirk's way. They just knew that probably Peters was going to probably ignore the running back to consider covering Kirk because, he thinks, well, I should be covering that guy, right? And that's kind of what happened, right? He's in a formation now where he's like, okay, I'm going to look and see what's in front of me because I think that's the more dangerous threat. And then, what do you know, Clark doesn't make, the play to be able to get and cover the running back on the go route, and then you complete the touchdown over his head, right? So, yeah, I mean, I think it's a good point. And, yeah, it's unfortunately, yeah, with Hamilton out, that's a liability of this defense. We just don't have enough guys on the field who can truly cover at this level. They just really haven't shown enough. But I think back to the inside linebacker play too. I generally agree with you. Yeah, I think it's been okay. I mean, I can't say that it's been like fantastic, but certainly I think the level of play is above maybe the first couple of weeks where everybody shit on Queen and the linebackers kind of day. It's definitely better than what it was here. But that being said, I know it's only Roquan's third week here as a Raven. Part of me maybe expects a few more kind of plays, particularly in pass defense. I know that's not necessarily his strong suit, but that is something I maybe kind of expected a little bit more impact. But that being said, he's still making plays. I don't know. I feel like I need to calibrate here. Do you guys think that he's sort of been as advertised right now? Or do you think that, maybe we still need a couple more weeks for him to kind of be cemented into the defense before he can really take off?
For the most part, I think so. Rewatching the game, I didn't get to rewatch in as much detail as I would want to, but you saw a lot of instances. He's still constantly around the ball, which is what we saw the first 2 weeks. Now, sure, there were instances last game where he missed tackles. There were instances where there was one play in particular where he was running after to the linebacker sideways, and instead of tackling him, he just tried to truck him, shoulder him down, and that didn't work. The running back got through there, was able to pick up the first down. That feels nitpicky, though. I think he's doing well, but I do agree, pass defense does not really seem to be somewhere he's standing out at the moment. I can't point to a play where I can tell you, okay, that play was a positive play for the offense because Roquan Smith missed an assignment or didn't make a play. So to that degree, I don't think he's killing the Ravens' pass defense, but is he making a positive impact? It's not obvious. I'd have to watch more of the film for that, to be honest, but I think overall, I've been pleased with what I've seen so far from him. I think so far, it's been a good move.
Oh yeah, totally. I wasn't trying to even say bad things about the inside linebacker group. I just think they didn't have too many splash plays. I know
Sure.
that Queen had a tackle for loss. I mean, Roquan, he's a little bit of everywhere as far as in coverage and is being around the ball. I don't even think they had a bad game whatsoever. But it was just one of those things where I think they had more splash plays in other games where they maybe made their presence known a little bit more. But honestly, I think we gotta just give it one more time credit to Trevor Lawrence. Sir, we talked about you. There was a joke that you maybe even listened to the pod because of the way you responded. You have crumbled in the past under pressure this year in tight situations, and you flourished. There was a couple times, like the hasty touchdown where he threw the first touchdown, of the day for them after the short field. He got pummeled. He threw that. He stood strong in the pocket. He threw that ball, got absolutely pummeled, and touchdown Jags. And we saw him just orchestrate some very long drives against a defense that I still think is good. And he found the soft spots, found the places that he could exploit them, made plays, and I honestly think it's a statement game for his career, and it could be the sign of him level jumping to the next echelon of quarterback. From above average starter to maybe like the A tier, where you're like, okay, like maybe he's like a Justin Herbert level player now, and that's awesome for him and for the Jags, obviously. And I think we can't let that pass. Like we totally talked about in the preview, like this kid kind of might be there. Like he has flashes here and there, and if he can just get that one last piece of his game, like that's the level jump. We literally discussed this exact thing, and then there you go, he did it. So I just give credit to him. I give credit to I give credit to Hasty for coming in for ETN and performing at a good level. The guy, I mean, he had some daylight. Like he had the opportunity given to him, but he took it. And we didn't play a good enough game to win on defense or offense. And I think that's what it comes down to. Like, yeah, we had one turnover. Yeah, we had 4 sacks. We almost had another turnover. We had, I guess, a turnover on downs on their there's a lot of like swapping though. We did all the same things to them. We had a turnover on downs. We had a fumble, close to the goal line. So it kind of almost equalized. Like our defense didn't do enough to change the tide almost in this game.
For sure. And I do think we have to put this game into context, and you put it beautifully there. I personally am not too concerned that the Ravens lost this game. I understand that a pretty sizable amount of the fan base looks at this game, and sure, you can make the argument. What was Jacksonville's record going into this game? 3-7. The Ravens lost to 3-7 team when they have aspirations of going to the Super Bowl this year. Somehow, Jacksonville's record going into this game was actually worse than Carolina's was. Carolina actually had 4-8 going into the year, now 5-8 after beating. No. Excuse me. 4-8 after they beat Denver. Regardless, on the year right now, this year, Jaguars record comparable to Carolina. If the Ravens had lost to Carolina last week, I would be extremely concerned about the season going forward. Carolina and Jacksonville are not the same team. Carolina is lost. Carolina doesn't know who their head coach is going to be next year. They don't know who the heck's even going to be on their roster besides DJ Moore. Like, they have no identity as a franchise right now, whereas the Jaguars are putting pieces together. And in a way, this game kind of reminded me of two things. Two instances of games, one in relation to the Ravens and the other the Orioles, actually. And I think we'll have to see what happens, but I do think there's a good chance a year or two from now we'll understand this loss. I was thinking back after this game to 2011, if you guys remember, after the Ravens had the epic win on Sunday Night Football in Pittsburgh. Joe Flacco throws the game-winning touchdown pass to Torrey Smith twice. Torrey catches it on the second one, but what everyone forgets is the next week after that, they go up to Seattle and just put up a dud. And, after that game, we were all kind of confused. Like, why were the Ravens having so much trouble against Seattle? They're not very good. What is it with this secondary? They couldn't throw deep against them at all. And of course, we find out the next year after that, oh, wow, actually, it's Cam Chancellor, Earl Thomas, Richard Sherman secondary is pretty darn good. And Pete Carroll has something going on here. That was a team that was just about ready to turn the corner. Another instance you could look at is 2014, the Orioles, their second half of that season. We all know that's the most recent season the Orioles had true dominance, won the AL East, made it all the way to the ALCS, where they unfortunately got swept by the Royals. But in that second half of the regular season, the Orioles only suffered one single sweep, and that was, at the time, unexpected sweep up in Wrigley to the Cubs, who were struggling at that point. Included an opening night matchup where they got destroyed by former pitcher Jake Arrieta. And at the time, it was kind of like, wait a second, this is really questionable here. The Orioles got swept by the Cubs. What's going on here? The Cubs are terrible. The Orioles are on a streak right now. But next year, obviously, the Cubs had a big year, won the World Series the year after that. And, that's just a long aside for me to say, like, that's how I'm kind of looking at this game here. This is a team on the rise. I don't think this is a bad loss by the Ravens. They kept it close. Yes, they should have won it, but you got to give credit to the guys on the other side of the field. We said it in the preview, there's quality players here. The Ravens need to shore some things up, but even when you're a team that shores up the things that you're struggling with, more often than not, you're not going to win every game in the back half. So that's just a long way of me saying, like, trying to put the game into a little more perspective of those of us who are, uber frustrated about who we lost to. I think they're better than their record, and I think in a couple years we'll understand this loss more.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I definitely hear what you're saying, Peter. I kind of agree with you. I think the other thing to kind of take away from this game, too, is like, well, just from the defensive side of the ball, because we'll get to the offense in a minute, but from the defensive side of the ball, I don't think we've learned anything that we didn't already know, right? We knew we didn't have a third corner. Hamilton was the guy. Now we just solidified, okay, we really need Hamilton back. We might have learned a little bit more maybe about Peter's situation, but then again, like, some signs were there. Is it really that new? Maybe not. So from like a personnel and like, okay, what are the Ravens withdrawing there? It's like, oh, you've seen a lot of the same things in other games, right? It's just the matchup is slightly different. So yeah, I mean, from the defensive side of the things, sure. Do I have some worries long term about what our cornerback depth is going to be? Sure, but this is a recap. We're not here to analyze the defense and what the strategy is going to be in 2023. That's not what we're here for. So, yeah, I mean, we can hold off on that for now and kind of just take it one game at a time. So I think it's a good mindset and kind of a good transition point. We should talk about the offense because we're going to need a lot of that perspective in a minute.
Can I come with my prepared statement?
Absolutely.
All right. So I have a hypothesis of what's going on. And unfortunately, like, the All-22 is not out yet. Recording Monday night, but we'll get back to you. We'll watch it eventually. But here's the thing. So presser happened today with Harbaugh. No mention of Roman, although he did open up saying that the defensive coaches are still looking at the game. And I was like, "What about the offensive coaches? What's going on there?" And then he didn't say anything. So I think the reason that we're having issues with Roman right now is that his offense is designed that things have to be perfect and well executed, or it's going to fall off the rails. And I specifically think his second down play choices are really suspect. And what I mean by that is he is so thirsty for another fresh set of downs that on second and short, the man does not allow for him to take a chunk play, take a chance downfield. He just wants to get that easy conversion and move the chains. And this offense is not explosive enough with the offensive weapons we currently have to say that's okay. Because they need any chance they get to scheme in a chunk play opportunity. And because they're not making it by themselves. They're just not that dynamic. And that's where we're at. So if they're not going to make huge chunk plays out of, what was supposed to be a routine play, they get some yak, etc., you need to take the opportunity that you do have to take shots downfield and try to, make it happen intentionally rather than just happening randomly. And then secondly, I think it's really highlighted by the designed Ricard screen. But if you're going to scheme a play on second and long to try to make it into third and manageable, maybe give it to a guy that's just a little bit more athletic. I'm not even trying to diss on Ricard. I like what he does, but his best case scenario is he rumbles for 10 yards, right? He's not going to do much more. He's not going to surprise you with the first down, I don't think. And I just think that play is a little bad. And then getting more into the fact that they have to always be on schedule. We saw so many drops in this game, some in really bad spots, right? Robinson could have had an end zone, touchdown there, drops in the end zone. Drake and Duvernay drop catches in the flat that completely flip the script of what's, the next down in distance. And then Oliver had that one real tough catch too, but he missed it. That could have been a touchdown. And I just think you have I just don't know with the current personnel why we're playing an offensive scheme that's so incredibly dependent on perfection. And I think it's a big mistake. So that's my biggest issue with Roman right now.
Yeah, it's a valid take. I'd be lying if I could say I could pinpoint the exact issue that I have with it. I don't know if I have that much of an issue with the scheme, honestly. Everything you're saying is valid, and I think that there's all valid criticisms of what the Ravens are doing. But I also look at what the Ravens called yesterday, and I don't think Greg Roman was the issue. I'm sorry. I think that, but maybe it is what leading into what you're saying with perfection here, because the reason that I say that is because if the plays called as designed, succeeded, which I think there was an opportunity for them to,
sure,
then the Ravens are able to score touchdowns, and that was really the only thing that the reason that they lost the game. They allowed the Jaguars to hang in there because they kept settling for field goals rather than touchdowns. And it's been talked about a lot. Lamar's deep ball accuracy in the game was a little off. That's an aspect of an offense, especially in today's NFL, that you got to have working to keep defenses honest and have them not crowd the box. And the Ravens, they had opportunities to do it. Lamar was able to hit Deshaun Jackson on that huge play at the end, but you still got to hit him a little more on that. So, yeah, I do understand the criticism of Roman in this game. I think some of it's valid. I think you also have to look at the fact that there's a lot of injuries on this offense and just wonder what is the best expectation that we can have given that. And I think one perfect example of that is the pass early in the first quarter. It might have even been the first offensive drive. You had Lamar Jackson read the defense well, I thought, on a rollout, waited for an open receiver, had DeMarcus Robinson in the back of the end zone, and they just weren't able to complete the play. Was that a catchable ball? Possibly. Did Lamar throw it too low? Possibly. But I regardless of exactly the specifics of what happened, I think what you're seeing there is just Lamar and Robinson just still have not had enough time to develop the type of communication that, say, Lamar had with Marquise Brown all those years, and the type of communication that he does have with Mark Andrews, although Andrews did have the case of the dropsies yesterday. I do wonder how much that shoulder injury is impacting him, because the drop he had in the end zone in particular was troubling. And yeah, I don't know. Unfortunately, I don't think there's a simple answer. And that's just the case that there is when you're dealing with a team mid-season that's had all these injuries that they've had. And they're just going to have to continue to find unconventional ways to keep this engine rolling.
Yeah. I mean, I'll say, like, it's on the fence. Yeah, I feel like there's so many things wrong, but in general, I do think it's like, it's just this offense is concerning just from like a depth perspective of, yeah, we have so many injuries now. Bateman's obviously out. Andrews, I agree with you, Peter. It seems like he's not 100%. He's still dealing with the shoulder injury, likely out. Was it an ankle, I think, that held him out of this game. Kohler also out. So we have, we do have Oliver, and I think Oliver had a good game. We could talk more about kind of what he did, but then, Nick Boyle got a few more snaps than usual. We've already kind of talked about Nick Boyle's probably on his way out. Not really having the same impact that he did in 2020 or prior to that. Yeah, so I mean, lots of injuries, obviously. I think that speaks for itself. I don't know. Our offense doesn't seem like it's, in the preseason, we have our like huge streak, and that's a testament to our depth. In the regular season, it seems like it's just not the same level. There's execution issues, personnel issues, play calling issues. Things aren't really lining up. There's a lot of, and that in general, I think is a pretty big concern for me. It's just, why is our offense always performing this poorly? At some point, like I almost kind of, well, I don't want to say I wish this, but it would be easier, let's say, if we had a Russell Wilson paid $250 million and we knew, like, that guy's the problem. And we'll talk about more about him next week. But we really, like, we don't have that, like that's not an issue. It's not like our entire roster is taken up by a player. Not yet. It's not that. In terms of like play calling, I thought that they were like, we got Duvernay more involved. We wanted to see that. We got him more involved. That was good. Robinson continues to get a little bit more involved. Yes, he did have a drop. He's not perfect, but like that's also good. I do think there were elements to this offense of like, hey, we didn't have this last week. Now we have it this week. So from like a play calling, I don't necessarily think that the game plan was off, but yeah, like, just personnel issues of like, we don't have a deep ball game. We took a shot, but that's it. Lamar's not hitting the other shots, or receivers not catching some of these other deep shots. The offense is very constricted. Run game obviously not there. Gus played okay. Obviously that fumble in the fourth quarter, that kind of killed the game. It was definitely a play that he wanted to have back. I guess what I'm saying, like there are a lot of issues here. It would not surprise me if a change was made at some point this season, because whether it's like Roman's fault or not, this offense could use a spark. Frankly, execution's just really poor. The red zone numbers are just awful, atrocious. That's really the difference to this game. And, we need something. Like, I'm not expecting the Kansas City or the Buffalo offense out of this team, but to be an efficient offense that can score greater than 20 to 30 points consistently and actually get a couple of touchdowns, you got to have that.
But let's talk about that, because I think I actually do want to think you brought up something there that's actually very interesting, because I think going into this year and even last year, like, we were expecting this offense to always be on par with the Kansas City and the Buffalo offense, especially considering the talent that Lamar Jackson is when you compare him with Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen. In spite of some struggles that he's had this year, I think, unbiased take, you got to label him with those other two as the most dynamic quarterbacks in this league. But yet we've seen those offenses, Mahomes in particular, they didn't really replace Tyreek Hill in the offseason, and yet the Chiefs are continuing to roll as usual. The Bills have no run game still, and they're still able to keep rolling on their offense. But that being said, are we also just blowing these offensive issues and really the issues that the team is having out of proportion? Because the Ravens, they are 7-4. If the season ended today, they would be they're fifth in the conference right now. There's 4 teams tied at 7-4. The Ravens are 1 seed behind the Titans. Bills are 8-3. Chiefs are 9-2. Like, are we look at their record and it sometimes feels like we're talking about a 4-17, but they're 7-4. Are we blowing these things out of proportion, or is it really that this offense isn't hitting as much as in the past, and it's not as, it doesn't have the same ceiling that it did those years?
That's exactly it, Peter. The stats bear it out. Actually, we're not horrible in the red zone compared to the rest of the league. We're just bad for Ravens standards in the Lamar era. And we're down about 9 percentage points in the red zone efficiency, which feels worse than those numbers suggest. And I think it's because, like, the red zone's a big place. I would like to see the breakdown of, like, how often we've got inside the 10 and failed, because I feel like that's, like, the killer. Like, we get to the last set of downs. You can't get any more downs. There's no more first downs to make. That means you're super close, and we fail there. And I think that's the real, like, new level of wrinkle that is bad, because I think actually all of our failures in the red zone got to that state. Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure it's true. Of, like, there's no more first downs to be had. You've gotten as close as one can get, and they can't pull it out. And that's super, super duper frustrating. And I also think that the issue is, like, scoring 27 points, not that bad. I think there were at least 31, 35 points available based on the plays called. Like you guys said, there was more points to be had even with the plays called. So you could say Roman's not the problem because there was more points to be had and they should have had him, etc. I think there could have been maybe 40 if he called a different set of plays, but that's neither here nor there almost. I just think you got to see a way for them to execute. And we haven't even talked about this whole, like, Lamar clapping his hands, begging for the snap. This happened at least 6 times in this game. And it's so gruesome. Particularly, I thought it was absolutely terrible that they get to the line slow after that respot 4th and 1 situation, and they don't call timeout. Like, Lamar didn't call timeout. Harbs didn't call timeout. Some other person on the planet that's allowed to call timeout didn't call timeout. They looked not all put together on a high leverage play. And you're just like, you have timeouts, boys and girls. Like, I don't even think we used all our first half timeouts, and we just like completely blew it there. So I think that really hurt us. And I just think there's the operational things. I think Roman has a problem of needing to find that like optimal play. It takes an extra 4 or 5 seconds. They have to do the substitutions for it. They're getting to the line with like 7 seconds to go. People are like struggling to get a line. They can't do motions. They can't do checks or clapping. It's just a mess. It's inexcusable. I think it'd be better to call a less optimal play and get to the line sooner and trust that Lamar can check into something or do something than to like figure it out in the huddle and figure it out like, Go with your 12 personnel. Have Ricard in there if you have to. Do a 22, whatever. But, like, go in a personnel package that you feel really comfy in. Go do your thing. And let, like, Lamar figure it out. And, like, not have him have to rush so much. I think it's inexcusable. Like, you know what? Like, fine. You're not going to give us 11 personnel? Fine. Just give him some time at the line. Sheesh.
Yeah, I think that's totally valid. I was going to mention that before. I think if anything is like the big criticism from this game is exactly what you said, Alec. I mean, I feel like this is all related too. I mean, obviously like Linderbaum had some issues with delay of game penalties, but like if you get the play call out 5-10 seconds sooner, are you even in that position? You know what I mean? It's a backbreaker, man. Especially, I like what you said earlier too of just, I think it feels worse because the Ravens seem to have no issues moving the ball up and down the field until they get to the red zone. So it's like when you hit that point, you're like, your offense is rolling, everything's clicking, like things are looking great, and you're like, okay, let's cap it off the touchdown, and then you don't, and now it feels awful because like, what was the problem? Everything else was working. Yeah, and then just to add on like all the pre-snap stuff in there too, man. It's just, oh my god, it seems like basic shit that he's supposed to have figured out. And that I don't know. I mean, I get where Lamar's coming from. We haven't even talked about, and we honestly like don't really need to talk. We're not Jameson Hensley here, but like we haven't even talked about the post-game antic. But like I understand, man, where he's coming from and just like some of this stuff and just like. Do I think he could respond better? Absolutely. But like,
don't tweet.
Yeah, don't tweet.
Lamar, we'll never want a Twitter. Don't tweet.
Yeah, I was gonna say Lamar, be like me. I uninstalled it from my phone, so I'm all good. Almost missed Jason's message, but I got that and we were good. But I understand where he's coming from, man, because some things just go really well with his team, and then when they don't, it just breaks you.
I don't understand why anyone who's in the public eye has a Twitter. It's like. You have news outlets that will interview you. Like you have all these outlets to get your message out, and like all you're going to do if you go on Twitter is just see a billion mentions of everyone saying how much you suck because they're insecure and depressed about their own life. Just why are you on Twitter? It's for no names. It's for us people who need to create our own persona. I don't know. Anyways, that's off topic. But yeah, I agree with you 100%. All you guys with the play calling. It's like I did say earlier, I don't know if there's an easy way to solve the offense, but that would seem to be the easiest way to solve things is to just figure out, okay, how can we shave even 5 seconds off of the time it's taking for us to get the play in and get everyone to the line of scrimmage? You would think that would be something that could be fixed easily. I did say after the Panthers game that was something that did have me concerned that was still an issue coming out of the bye. We saw it as an issue against Jacksonville here, but it seems like it should be easy. But for some reason, it hasn't been this year for this team, and quite frankly, it was an issue last year as well. So
Harbaugh mentioned it. I think he mentioned that maybe we had to take some of the offense away in order to get the plays out faster. And I don't think he actually means completely cancel a formation or whatever. I honestly think it is this. It feels to me that every time Roman wants to pick a play, he's choosing from the Cheesecake Factory level menu of what to eat. And like he really just needs like the price fix option. All right, like just give him like 6 plays maybe.
Show
like,
me your specials. That's all I want to
show me your
see.
special. like he's like looking at this monster menu of like every play in his outlet, and it's just like, no, let's just. You got 3 choices, dude. You got A, B, or C. Like that's it. Yeah, give me your specials. And I wonder if it's like a computer program that could do it. You know, tendency breakers, some kind of analytics back end that could like suggest a play. It'd be so cool. Like, I'm just saying it right now, Ravens. If you want to hire me to build this, I'm interested. I think Chris would be really helpful. I think Peter could be really helpful once he's back from his paternity leave, like to build this like this idea of like we have a state of the offense on the field, we have the down and distance, and like we just call a play from the playbook based on the down distance and state of the current offense and like how long it might take to change. Like, I feel like it could be done. New OC AI.
See, I'm already out on this based on my previous comment. I don't want randos in my Twitter mentions yelling at me about how I suck at life because our AI bot botched a 4th and goal opportunity.
Like, I had a couple things for that. One already exists. It's called Madden. It comes out every year.
I know.
And it usually includes halfback ISO and 4 verts and 1 other play. Maybe like a play action bootleg or something. I don't know.
Engage 8 blitz on defense.
Right.
You know what? I just had an idea. What if we do this? Harbaugh makes Roman call plays from the sideline.
Ooh.
Not in the booth anymore. Doesn't have the comfort of just like, oh, I can like, because of like, come on, if he's, I mean, I don't know what he's got in the booth, but I tell you what, like, if he's already in there, he's got all the tablets and everything around him, like, maybe he's got some of that already. I don't know. But like, maybe if we need to like simplify, go back to the specials menu, you just do it from the sideline. You don't have any of that. Just go back old school, man. Right. Just make him do it.
You can take away play sheets if things are going, too slow to the line.
Sorry, Greg. I got to take that. Too many run plays.
Yeah, I just think it's interesting. It's very interesting where they're at. I think the thing I tweeted it out. We got a like by a good friend of the show, and it was just like, I think the reason we're sick to our stomach about this team is you look at it and they're so close to a perfect record. They're so close to being like way better than they are, and I don't think they're so close to having lost a lot more games. It seems like they're really just closer to a better outcome than a worse. So when you take it from that perspective, I think like if they can figure it out in the next 3 to 4 weeks, as we get more offensive players online, hopefully get less injuries. They just figure things out. Like they improve. They figure out how to get to the line 5 seconds faster. They start calling more opportunistic plays in second and short, maybe, right? They just put a couple key factors together. Certain players start getting hot. Deshaun Jackson's hamstrings aren't, old old rubber bands, and he's able to play more than 10 snaps a game, and maybe he's able to play 20 because like he honestly looks pretty decent. Like maybe, just maybe, they'll get hot when it actually matters, because it looks pretty clear that they'll still make the playoffs. Maybe they won't win the division. They probably will. Maybe they won't get, a 3rd seed, but what they might get is a chance. And as long as they're hot and they have a chance, I think it's fine. I would take them being the 6th seed and hot than their 3rd seed and still struggling with all the same stuff. So give us some adversity and give us a chance to grow.
If there's one thing we know about the Ravens, it doesn't matter what seed they are. Just get them in the tournament, and the sky's the limit. MVPs? Or no, Moral Victory Awards. Moral Victory Awards. Oh, man. Moral Victory Awards. See, Alec just got me so hyped up, I forgot that the Ravens lost the game. But they did, unfortunately. It was a big bummer. But sure, Moral Victory Awards. I got to give it, though, man. We didn't even talk about this play. I got to give it to Justin Tucker, man. He missed that field goal. It was 67 freaking yards. It looked from the camera angle like it had a chance. I don't know. I haven't gotten a chance to look at any other angles, but still, I don't think any NFL kicker in the league could have made that kick as close to as he did. outdoors. So, despite missing the kick, I think Justin Tucker continued to establish himself as the greatest kicker in NFL history. So he gets it from me.
Well said, dude. It was crazy to me that they squibbed the kick. I was like, that's good field position. That feels nice. They have 13 seconds. I thought they could get 2 plays. The play took too long. They got to the sideline, and I'm watching the game, and I'm like, God, there's no way, is there? There's just there's no way he's gonna break his own record outdoors. They said there was no wind as the little thing fluttered backwards. There was definitely a little bit of wind, and my golly, he needed help, not anything against. So you can't tell me no wind. So there was that, but it was killer, dude, because he sends it, and you're like, it's straight as a nail. It looks like it has a chance, and maybe it makes it with a 3 or 4 yards closer. So I am very impressed by that play. I'm going to give my MVP to a really easy candidate. Marlon Humphrey had an awesome game. The sack, the tackle for a loss. Oh, I'm so sorry. Chris, do you want to talk about him instead?
No. You got to go.
All right. Yeah, he had a great game, and he's also the only corner that we can trust right now, so that's big props too. So Marlon Humphrey, you got my MVP. Or moral victory, sorry.
Yeah. MVA?
Yes.
Yeah. Moral victory? MVA? Okay. Yeah, that was a good one. I was thinking about doing Marlo as well. It's just the easy choice. I'll give mine to Calais Campbell. I thought he had a particularly good game. It's great to see. Also, Jags fan base, pretty classy. I saw that they had kind of put him up on the scoreboard probably early in the game. So they seem to really appreciate his contributions to the franchise for that, short-lived, AFC Championship appearance for them. He was a big part of that 2017 defense on that squad. So I thought he had a particularly good game. Obviously, the sack at the end of the game would have been really big if we had held on that 3rd down and then the eventual 4th down. Just, man, to see him continue to play at such a high level at his age is crazy. I'm still amazed at the stat that somebody brought up a couple of weeks ago. He's the oldest defensive player in the league. It just seems crazy that there's nobody else out there who's been there longer. But and he still continues to play well.
Well, that wraps up this One Winning Pod recap episode of a really disappointing loss in Jacksonville. The Ravens got darn close, but weren't able to pull it out. We hope that they can rebound against one of the most pathetic, embarrassing teams of the decade. The Broncos country, let's fly, ride, whatever, are coming to the bank, and they're 3-8 right now. They should not be able to win. The Ravens are favored by 8.5 points. Bringing Jan into the Ring of Honor. Hopefully, they're able to rebound. We're going to discuss that game next. You can catch it later in the week and your podcast player of choice. You can find us on Twitter at One Winning Pod. You can find us on YouTube with our bets and Ravens history at One Winning Pod as well. And you can email us onewinningpod@gmail.com. We'll see you later in the week with our Broncos preview. And hopefully you had a good Thanksgiving and can enjoy the rest of the week as we move forward to December and the next slate of games.